Hello, everyone. This is Brenda Wheeler from the International Institute of Genealogical Studies, found at genealogicalstudies.com. Today, we're talking about Australian resources. And what I'm doing here is I'm using the resources that I have in Australia as an example of the types of records and the sort of information you can glean about your ancestors and their migration. Where did they come from? When did they get there? All of that sort of thing. And we'll go through, and whilst I'm talking about the Australian resources, I'll also be looking at what is actually in those resources. Okay, so we start with birth, marriage, and death certificates. And here I've got a New South Wales birth certificate, and this belongs to a child called Rosa Florence Gertrude Trickett, who was born on the 5th of June 1890. Now, New South Wales indexes are online, but their certificates are quite expensive. So one thing you do with New South Wales is this is one area where you tend to utilise the transcription agents who are a lot cheaper, about a quarter of the price. And in this case, where I've ordered and got the birth certificate, if there had been anything written in the margins or any other notations, I wouldn't see those because I've just asked for the certificate and that's what I've got. With the transcription agents, they look at the certificate and they transcribe it, and they also include any other notations that are there. So, from that point of view, using a transcription agent is actually better than getting the certificate. So, here we've got the name of the child, and from the date and place of birth of the child, we can compare that with the mother in the informant column, which is underneath the date and place of birth of the child, and the informant Rosa Trickett, mother, Lighthouse Street, St Leonard's, North Shore, which is where the child was born. So we know that from that, we know this was a home birth. Uh, Rosa has been left at home. She didn't go down she wasn't taken down the registration office when Rosa went when her mother went down. It's a female child, yes, and we've got her father's name as William Trickett. We know what work he was doing. He was inspector for the government works. We know how old William was. He was 42. So that gives us a pretty good idea then of a date range for a birth for him. We also know that he was born in New South Wales at Greenwich, Parramatta River. So we're narrowing down his age to his date of birth or the year of birth and where he was born. And that's going to make it a lot easier getting details of his birth. We also get the date and place of where he married. So William Trickett married on the 5th of October 1866 in Balmain, which is part of Sydney. And we also have previous issue. What's previous issue? That's the children born to William and Rosa Trickett. And we've got here 5 males and 5 females all living. So poor Rosa Rufina Trickett, the mother, has already had 10 children from sometime between 1866 and 1890. She's had 10 children already. From the mother's name, we've got the maiden surname, her age and birthplace. So we know that in this case, Rosa Rufina was formerly Rosa Rufina Wilkie before she married. She is 42 years old, same age as her husband, and in this case, she was born in the district of North Shore, which also is in New South Wales in the Sydney area. We know that Rosa was the informant, given as the mother. She's got two witnesses. These people were present at the birth. So we have the doctor and Mrs. F. Wilkie, which one would assume is either Rosa's mother or a sister-in-law. And we have the particulars of the registration done just over a month later. So from that, you can see we've actually got quite a lot of information from that one birth certificate. Moving over the border, up a bit into Queensland, we've got another birth certificate. Now, this is quite an early one. This is 1864. And that would certainly be a very early birth certificate to read. So I'll go through it. In this case, the child's name is Hannah Emily. All of that, the numbers under her name are because the registrar made a mistake. And this is where there would be a notation in the side as to why it's got, he's crossed out not present. So obviously the child was present after all. So Hannah Emily is the child. She was born on the 30th of September, 1864 in Charlotte Street, Brisbane. And if we look again at the informant, in this case, Mary Jane, the mother, is living at Charlotte Street, Brisbane. So again, we know this is a home birth. So what details do we have for the father? Well, this is quite a sad birth certificate, actually, because when we look at the father's name, Thomas Hutchins Collins, into rank or profession, it's got deceased, and he was formerly a carpenter. So before this child is born, her father has already died. He was 27 years old, and he was born in Chudley, which is a town in Devon in England. So there again, we can see a lot of information about Thomas Hutchins Collins, and you can pretty much guess what his mother's surname was. His mother, in this case, actually was Mrs. Hutchins or Miss Hutchins. So Thomas Hutchins Collins, he's taken his mother's maiden surname as his middle name. Quite common in the olden days, so it is a help when you're looking for a marriage certificate or a birth certificate of someone. Again, we've got where and when they were married. In this case, he was married, or the couple were married on the 24th of November 1860 in Warwick, which is part of Queensland, a town in Queensland. And again, we've been given the children. Here we've got living is Thomas, who is age 2, and dead, a daughter. The interesting fact is that you won't see this, but on the death certificate of Thomas Hutchins Collins, that daughter was still alive. So this mother is having a very sad time of it because she's lost her husband, and then one of her children, her daughter, has died as well. So you can start seeing the difficulty that these people lived under in those days. I can tell you that Thomas Hutchins Collins died of 6 weeks of diarrhea. So I don't think I like diarrhea after even 24 hours, but 6 weeks, no way. Mary Jane, formerly Collins, his wife, is only 21 even now. So she would have been 16 when she got married. And she was born in Sydney, New South Wales. So at 21, 1864 is when Hannah, her child, is being born. So she would have been born in 1843 or thereabouts, less than 60 years after the colony was first colonised. So this is one of the early births in New South Wales. That's when the history comes into it, and that fascinates me, that these people living in quite harsh conditions in those days. And obviously, in this case, the informant is the mother, Mary James Collings. Can you see? Her maiden surname was Collins, and when she married, it became Collings. So quite unusual that. And yes, her address, Charlotte Street in Brisbane. At some point or other, she has moved to Brisbane from Sydney, whether her parents moved or what. But as she got married in Warwick in Queensland, there is something there that suggests that she's met and married Thomas while she was in Queensland. So again, we've got in this case we've got one um, witness to the birth, and that is the nurse. You've got you can have the accoucheur as number one, number two, a nurse, or number three, names of witnesses. Well, this has been filled in by number two, so this was the midwife. These are Victorian registers. Interesting way of receiving a birth certificate. Now, these ones you can actually order and download online. They're sent to you via email, and you are quids in if you've got the birth of twins, because on this page, you're given the whole page out of the actual register, the birth register. And they just photocopy the whole page and send you the information. So if you had twins, if it was me, Murphy's Law says that one twin would be on one page and the other twin would be on another page. But it could be that you'd be lucky enough to get the birth of the two twins on one page, saving you money. In this case, it's very hard to read because they are all the certificates are there for 5 different children. And the one I'm interested in is 1, 2, 3, the fourth one down. And what I've done is to enlarge that one for you. And here we've got the birth certificate of Peter McArdle. And he was born, the birth was registered, no, he was born on the 25th of June, 1879, in a place called Dead Horse, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Dead Horse, Bungaree Shire, in the county of Grenville, and in Victoria. And Dead Horse, one of the mining areas, gold mining areas. So his name there is given as Peter, and he's not present at the registration. A male child, and the father's name is Peter McArdle. He is a woodcarter. Wood would have been a very valuable resource to that mining community. Not just wood for fires, wood for homes, and wood for props for the mine shafts. He's age 45, and his birthplace, in this case, very valuable information, Meath in Ireland. Now, whether that is County Meath or Meath the city, we don't know. But that is the first information we have as to where the father's place of birth was. Now, the marriage and the children are in the next column. Now, Peter McArdle married in Meath in Ireland, and the children are named. And as you can see, there's plenty of them. We we have Catherine, Margaret, Anne, Jane, Bridget, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. Plenty of children there. The mother's name is, I think there's James on that list as well. James, yes, I can't see James from where I am because I've got the, let's just move those out to the side there. Yep, we've got James 3 as well. We've got all of their ages there as well, which can be very helpful, as you will see in a moment. His mother's name is up here, Elizabeth McArdle. Maiden surname Kelly. Oh, so helpful. I'm going to be looking for an Elizabeth Kelly. Wow. She's aged 39 and she is also living in Deadhorse with her husband. Another one here, you can see how you've got those bits of information. This is where I was talking about in some of the registries. You've got those little bits of information at the side, and that's just an addendum there where he's made a mistake. She's living in Deadhorse, Bungaree Shire, and her birth was she was born in also in Meath, Ireland, and she's aged 39. In this case, she was the informant. And actually, what I've done there is read out the informant's name as Mother Deadhorse. But she was 39 and she was born in Meath in Ireland. So you've got the details there that Elizabeth McArdle was also born in either County Meath or Meath City itself. No doctor was present at the birth, but there was a nurse and also a witness. And we've got the date of birth. We've got the date of registration, 22nd of June, 1880. Look at when the child was born, the 25th of June, 1879. So it has taken this family over a year to get to what you would call civilization, in this case in Ballarat, to register that birth. So they were living out in the country, and it's taken almost a year for the mother to get into Ballarat itself to be able to register that birth. So again, quite a lot of information there. And what we can do next is, this is what the indexes look like for New South Wales. Now, in this case, I was looking for John Breary. And have I got the right one? Well, yes, I was looking for John Breary, born to Jonathan and his wife Martha. So I know which one I'm after. It's there. The district is Central Cumberland, which is pretty much spot on. And the PDF availability, yeah, it's readily available. It's still going to cost me $67, though, to get a certificate from New South Wales. That's why we use transcription agents for New South Wales. $67. So over the side, you'll see I've put the relative costs of the certificates to be able to get one. Victorian indexes, the PDF will cost you $22.50. Queensland indexes, $24.70. Tasmania, wouldn't you love having ancestors living in Tasmania? All of their early births, deaths, and marriages are online for free. You just go to the Tasmanian website and there they are. Also, all of the convict records, all of that online for free. Brilliant website. West Australian, there are indexes for West Australian, and their uh, certificates cost $20. The Northern Territory indexes aren't available on a given website. They are available, though, on Find My Past. So that is one place where you can find them, which is unusual because that is quite a recent addition, because only recently have they gone on Find My Past. If you want one of those birth certificates, it's still going to cost you $54, though. Note when Northern Territory births, marriages, and deaths started in 1870. Before that, if you had someone living in Northern Territory, it was part of South Australia, and you will get South Australia. You will then have to go to the South Australian indexes. South Australia do not have their indexes online. What you have is the Genealogical Society, South Australian Genealogical and Heraldry Society, has the early registers on microfiche. They have transcribed those, and you can buy transcriptions from the Genealogical Society itself. If you just want the basic transcription, it's $26.40 for non-members. If you happen to know a member, then perhaps you better get to know her a bit better. Nod, nod, wink, wink. I am a member of the South Australian Genealogy and Heraldry Society. The ACT, the ACT was only formed in the 1900s, so their indexes reflect this. In their birth and death indexes are only, they start at 1930. Before that, everything was in New South Wales indexes. Marriages are a bit later, about 1848, I think, no, a bit later, about 1845, something like that. They are, again, not available as on a website of their own. They're available through Find My Past. New Zealand indexes, New Zealand certificates. There are times when I wished I lived in New Zealand, because the cost of their certificates are only $25, and they are available from 1840. Marriage is slightly later than that. So New Zealand indexes, West Australia are the best places to live. Victoria and Queensland aren't too bad either. But if you live in South Australia, New South Wales, or the ACT, be prepared to pay a lot of money for their certificates. Certificates. I've put this certificate up to show you just how much information can be gained from a death certificate. Now, here it was a death certificate from Victoria, and it was one of a series of 5 on the page. And I've just enlarged it all for you here so that you can get a chance to read some of the writing. Yes, it's cursive writing, but it's very nice cursive writing for you to read. This one is dated the 11th of April 1908 in Invermay, West Riding Shire of Bungaree, County of Grenville. So they're still in the Bungaree area. This is still the McArdle family that we met from that birth certificate. In this case, it's the father, Peter McArdle. He's now 73, or he was 73 years when he died. He died of congestion of the lungs and general decay, which he had that condition for about a month before he died on the 11th of April. Name and surname of father and mother. Edward McArdle. They don't know. The informant in this case didn't know exactly when what Edward McArdle did. And Catherine McArdle, maiden surname Kettlewell, who did home duties. So she didn't work. She was probably too busy having children as well. So we've got the parents' names of Peter McArdle, or to put it another way, the grandparents' names to add to the birth certificate of the Peter McArdle we saw on that birth certificate. Bit confusing that Peter McArdle, the son, his father's name was Peter McArdle, and his grandfather's name is Edward McArdle. His grandmother's name is Catherine McArdle, maiden surname Kettlewell. The informant was Edward McArdle, who was the eldest of the sons born to the McArdles, and he was also living in Ballarat. We've got the details of the registrar. We've also got the burial details, so you can go and look for the gravestone to see if there's any information on that gravestone. We've got the minister and the witnesses of the burial. And then we've got Peter McArdle, the deceased, details of where he was born, how long in Australia, and he was born in a small parish called Moynelvey in County Meath in Ireland. How helpful is that? Moynelvey is the parish we've got to look at in Ireland, and he lived in Victoria for 44 years. Is that going to be helpful? Yes. It's going to give us roughly when he came out to Australia. And if we have any trouble looking for further details, how about looking at Catherine or Margaret, those first two children, who their ages are 47 and 45, and they must therefore have been born in County Meath, Ireland. Were they born in Moynelvey as well? If we got their certificates, we may well find out. It's another aid to our research by looking at how long someone has been in Victoria. We've got a pretty good idea of when he arrived in Australia, although it could be that he arrived somewhere else as well. Perhaps he arrived in New South Wales and then moved over to Victoria, in which case that would, because it says how long in the Australian colonies, starting which. So if he had lived in New South Wales first, it would show how many years he'd lived in New South Wales before he moved to Victoria, where he lived for 44 years. You've got all of the children there, and you can see how many of them have died as well, because they're all listed with their ages, and we find that Annie has died by this time, and so has Bridget. So we're really getting to know the family by just looking and analysing the information on these certificates. What else can we look at when we're looking at reviewing Australian information? Newspapers. The National Library of Australia has Trove, brilliant website, full of newspapers from around the whole of Australia. They are always scanning more and digitising more newspapers. fascinating website to go and look at. In New Zealand, you have the website Papers Past. Again, via the National Library of New Zealand, you have all of the newspapers of New Zealand being digitised. So a lot of information can come from those newspapers. And if you've got a more unusual name of a ship, perhaps you can even find the ship's arrival date in either Australia or New Zealand. With the McArdles, it was quite a hard slog to find that ship because they actually came on the SS Hope, and you'll be surprised at how many times Hope is mentioned in newspaper reports. Migration. Here I've got the migration through the National Archives of Australia. And in this case, I've chosen quite a recent migration. In this case, it was the Sandley family, and they arrived in Adelaide. Their port of arrival was Adelaide on the 7th of October 1965. The ship they came in was the Fair Star. And if you look beside here, it says digital. So a digital copy of the passenger list is available. And there we are. That's what I've brought up here. There's 42 pages on that passenger list. And it goes through each place of docking, each place that they of arrival. So the first few pages would be for Fremantle, which, as you can see, was the first port of arrival. And after that, they went to Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and then Brisbane. And the dates of those arrivals. The date of arrival for Michael Sandley is given of the 7th of October because that was when they arrived in Australia. The first place of docking was Fremantle, and that was given as their port of arrival. The fact that they stayed on the ship and got off in Adelaide is where you have to look through the whole of the you've got here the port of arrival. Their eventual arrival was Adelaide, but that was not the date of arrival in Australia, which is different from the port of arrival. And you can see here, date of arrival, 7th of October on the shipping list there. And date of arrival in Adelaide was actually the 10th of October. So it's taken them 3 days to come around into Adelaide from Perth. New Zealand passenger lists are available on Family Search. So all of the passenger lists are there. Another place to look for records would be service records. In particular, World War I and World War II records are available in both Australia and New Zealand. And you can look at the whole of the record of Army, Navy, or Air Force, and you can download them and look all through and see how much information has been given in those records. You've got this guy, Mr. Hode's surname, Hode, and Oliver James, and he lives in Rockhampton in Queensland. He was born in Australia, and that's his age is there, 35. Date of birth is given. How helpful is that? When he married, see, he was single when he went in, but then he got married after he joined the army. And all of that information is given there. You've got the places where he started, his addresses, his contact addresses are all there as he changed addresses. So fascinating to look at. With New Zealand records are also online, service records. The first place to go, the easiest thing to do, is to go to the Auckland Museum online first off and actually get the service number of the person that you are trying to search for. Then go to the archives, the government archives, New Zealand, and much easier to find if you've got the service number, it will take you straight to that person. In this case, I've got Albert Edmund Buckley. And you can see for all of his work, there are 25 different pages to look through. So there's a lot of work to be able to look through that and see his war service as well. And he was in World War One. I've now got his army number, and absolutely fascinating reading through where he's been. What are census records in Australia? Yeah, right. Okay. We have the 1828 muster. This was in New South Wales because that's all there was at that time, New South Wales. This is what they call the TNA copy, the National Archives of England copy. You had a copy that is also available in Australia, but it's a lot harder to read. So the National Archives copy is a lot better to read. And in this case, I've got this from Ancestry. And the person I was interested here was Joseph Loom, down here, number 8. And all of his details, he was 30. He came on what ship? He was a government servant. In other words, he was a convict. He came on the Phoenix in 1828, so he's only just made it to Australia in time for the muster. Yes. And his life, he's transported for life. He cannot go back to England. And what he's doing now is he's a groom for quite a famous person, George Druitt, who, as you can see from here, lives at Mount Druitt. George Druitt was a surveyor. This mountain, small mountain, is in the Melville district. As you can see here, Melville has been named after George Druitt, and he's working for George Druitt. Other censuses we have, they only give the head of household. They're not much use. We have here, I've got Mr. Breary down the bottom here, and he lives at number 50 Frank Street. And there are 2 males and 2 females in his household. And that's all we've got for here. And this is all negatives, although there's ticks there for Chinese. That means they're blank. They are not a colony of Chinese. That is just the guy, the enumerator, ticking them off as not being any of those Chinese or Aboriginal. And that's basically it with the census information. So you can see why it is so important for Australian research that you look for as much information as you can on those birth and death certificates. The other thing we've got that is available, there's a stand-in for census records, are the electoral rolls. And here I've got Jonathan Breary. And because you had to be over 21 to get onto the lists, this is the list for 1933, available from Ancestry. I've got Jonathan, I've got John William, and I've got Martha. Jonathan is married to Martha. And if you remember that birth certificate we had for, or the indexes that we looked at for New South Wales, we had the birth certificate for John, and now John has reached, he's over the age of 21, so he is on the electoral roll along with Jonathan and Martha, his parents. He's not living at the same place though. Jonathan and Martha are living at 7 McDonald Street. John William himself is living at 29 Clark Road, Ramsgate. and he's a tram conductor. So it gives you a bit of information, but and the best thing is that it's telling you when they reach 21 as to when they go on the electoral rolls. Other places to look. You can see how much information I've got from those local records, but there's also the national record, the archives, the state archives. There's archives in every state. There's family history associations in most states, state libraries, local history societies. You'll be surprised at how many of the local history societies actually have records of the families in their areas. Church archives, a good one in South Australia is the Lutheran Church Archives. Fantastic place. Museums, state museums, local museums. What about the occupational museums just down the road from me? I've got the St John's Ambulance Brigade of South Australia. Their work records are in a museum in South Australia. So there's a lot of stuff you can get to. The army regimental sites, all of those sort of places are also available. So hopefully you've managed to not only get familiar with some of the records we've got in Australia, but also how to start analysing the records to send you on your hunt overseas to your migration families. So thank you very much for coming today and watching. This is Brenda Wheeler from the International Institute of Genealogical Studies, found at genealogicalstudies.com. Thank you very much.